So with the release of Bumblebee, we now have 6 movies in the live-action Transformers movie franchise, and given the fact that this franchise is incredibly close to my heart and incredibly special to me, I thought I'd take the time to do something a bit different, step away from a review just for a little bit, and do a ranking video of all 6 live-action Transformers movies, starting from the first one in 2007 up to Bumblebee. So, with all that out the way, with all that said, let's jump into the ranking.
We need a new army.
Transformers Age of Extinction is a bit of a weird one for me. Even as a kid going into this movie back in 2014, even I felt like there was something a little bit off. Even though I absolutely adore all of these movies, they are my ultimate guilty pleasures. This one, to me, always felt like the odd one out. This was the red-headed stepchild of the group. Even as a kid, I felt like it was something a bit different and a bit odd due to the fact that it had a different cast in terms of the human cast and also with the different cast of Autobots in the movie as well. I feel like the whole story in this film just is really lacking in comparison to a lot of the other ones, and it didn't really have the oomph that some of the others did. The Autobot cast overall, while more fleshed out, were not particularly outstanding with the additions of people like Hound, Drift, and Crosshairs, and then the human cast, while Cade Yeager, played by Mark Wahlberg, was a nice addition, his daughter was incredibly annoying, and also the boyfriend, played by Jack Rayner, who is otherwise a good actor, was dreadful in this film. So there was a bit of a mixed bag with all of this. Mix that with the villains. We have human villains in this movie who were just these massive cartoons, and then you have Lockdown, who was the main Decepticon villain, who was great in this movie, admittedly, probably the best villain of the franchise, in fact, but mixing those two elements together didn't quite work. But then there were other things as well, like Megatron coming back to life in the form of Galvatron was a weird choice, and all the Transformers who kind of came and transformed like that was really an odd choice, and something that looked very strange and not true to what Transformers were. I like this movie in some areas, and I feel like it was more of a setup for what we were going to get in The Last Night, but it wasn't exactly what this movie was aiming for, and the big selling point of the movie being the Dinobots were very underused in this film, and it kind of comes across as a bit of a misfire in comparison to the rest of the franchise.
Fate rarely calls upon us at a moment of our choosing.
You know, Revenge of the Fallen was actually always my favourite as a kid. I always went and watched this movie every single night when I got it on DVD for one Christmas. I think it would have been Christmas 2009. I got that movie and I watched it every single night when I went to sleep. And I loved this film so much as a kid. And obviously when you get older, and especially me getting older as more of a critic on film, I realise how truly terrible this movie is. However, this movie doesn't infuriate me in some ways like Age of Extinction does, which is why I'm placing it higher than that film. I feel like Revenge of the Fallen is purely spectacle. This film is purely Michael Bay being top tier Michael Bay. Like, this is him fully going for it. This is him going all the explosions, all the female archetypes, all the racist robots. Let's just throw them all in this movie and mix them all together. And obviously this film was a massive victim of the writer's strike as well, which caused this movie's script to be written in, I believe, 3 weeks, which is a pretty dreadful concept to comprehend. On top of that, all the other elements in this film, introducing things like Devastator, who granted was a brilliant visual set piece, again, just kind of wasted overall. And then you have other characters like the Fallen, who didn't really get the establishment he needed to be a really threatening villain like Megatron in the first film. And Megatron by himself was completely subsidized in this film, making him pretty much a side player. And on top of that, we have all of the female sex objectification, of course. Skids and Mudflap, although I still find them slightly amusing, they are incredibly racist in this movie. And everything else on top of that, the human cast, like bringing back Simmons in this movie, who's even more over the top in this one than he was in the first one. Leo Spitz was just a ridiculous character to bring in. The whole storyline of Sam going to college, and then there was the alien female robot in the movie, played Alice, I think her name was. And the parents were just awful in this film. You know, there's just so many bad elements. But all that being said, I can't help but love this movie. Like, I can't help but watch it and just have so much ridiculous fun with it. And there are also just some really good action in this scene, especially when you have the forest fight where Optimus gets killed is an insane awesome piece. And then when they all have to go to Egypt, the whole Egypt fight, although it lasts, I believe, 25 minutes, is still absurdly entertaining in parts, and I just really enjoyed all of it. And in the end, when I look back at this movie, this is my childhood right here, and I just love this movie. I love every aspect of it.
For my world to live, yours must die.
I think I defend The Last Night a lot more than most people do. I actually was really excited about The Last Night. Going into this film, I actually thought this one could genuinely be good. I thought all the elements were coming together nicely. I really liked what they were doing with the story. I really liked where they were taking the characters. And I thought, okay, this could be something really fun. Especially because this movie seemed to have a bit of a post-apocalyptic vibe going on into it. I thought that's a cool idea and a cool theme to play with. But it didn't really stick to that. However, overall, I actually think The Last Night, in regards to the Transformers franchise, is a little bit underrated. I think that this film actually has some really awesome elements. It even brings back the Dinobots in this movie to give them a bit more development, and even the characters who we had in the first film, such as Hound, Crosshairs, and Drift, even they get a little more stuff to do in this. Even if Drift is a bit pushed to the side in comparison to the other two, they still get some cool moments. And there are also some awesome characters introduced, like Anthony Hopkins, who, yes, granted, is here for a paycheck. He is very, very funny in this movie. The character of Cogsworth I thought was a nice addition. I actually really loved Vivian Wembley, who was played by Laura Harriet. I thought she was great in this film. And the continuation of Mark Wahlberg's character, what he's doing, he's now on the run. I thought that was an interesting idea and something that I didn't expect them to play with. Isabella Mona, although she was very, again, underused in this film, is very good, and you guys know I'm a big fan of Isabella Mona. I think for her breakout role here, she did a great job. And even just the action sequences. The only thing with this movie that really lets it down for me is the third act. I think the third act of the film, where they bring Cybertron to Earth again, is a bit too overblown. Like, there's just so much happening on screen to the point where you can't keep track of everything, and it's a bit overblown. But other than that, I feel like most of the elements in this movie come together pretty well, especially with the main selling point of this movie being Nemesis Prime. We see Optimus turned evil in this film, and we get a really awesome fight between him and Bumblebee, and that was a nice moment in this film as well, just a really good fan-pleasing moment. And although I wasn't a big fan of Quintessa as the villain of the film, I felt like this movie was more setting up more with her for the next film, which granted we know we're never going to get now, which is a shame, but I feel like when you look at her in this movie, she comes across as just a bit odd. Like, she came across as a bit out of place in comparison to the rest of the film, but we did get Nemesis Prime out of that, which was a nice addition. So overall, I feel like The Last Night is a little bit of an underrated film when it comes to the Transformers franchise.
No, no,
I'll drive, you shoot!
You have to get the car. Trust me.
bring it!
So this is the one that everyone pretty much fundamentally agrees on is alright. This is the one that people are like, yeah, that one's fine. The first movie is a pretty good way of putting it is fine. I think that this movie is actually very entertaining in parts. I enjoyed the introduction to this world. I enjoyed the basic cast of Autobots we had here with Optimus, Bumblebee, Ironhide, Ratchet, and Jazz. That was a really good cast we had. And even the Decepticons in this movie with Megatron, Starscream, Blackout, Brawl, really awesome characters who they bring in this film. And I really enjoyed the human cast in this movie as well. Like, Shia LaBeouf was pretty restrained in this film, especially when you get to 2 and 3. He's pretty restrained here. And even Megan Fox was also pretty restrained in this movie too. Not as bad as she is in the second film. So I think that they did a good job overall with this first film, and did a good job of establishing this character and this world into a live action format. Because when you look at it, before this, we were all wondering, how are they going to do a live action Transformers movie? And this film proved that it could be done, and could be done to a pretty high standard. Because say what you want about these films, say what you want about Michael Bay, but they are all beautifully made films. Like, they are all really well shot, and they are also really good looking in terms of their CGI. And on top of that, this movie was the precedent for that, and it was able to set that. And I think you're able to look at this movie and go, yeah, that was a good choice. That was a good starting point for this franchise. And overall, looking back on this movie, I rewatched it again very recently. I bought the Transformers 4K Blu-ray box set, and watching it there, I just was reminded of how fun and entertaining this movie is. This one doesn't have the stakes of some of the other ones. This one doesn't have, you know, the over-the-topness of some of the other ones. This one's just a really nice, plain, simple, fun action movie starring Transformers. And if that's what you're after, this movie will definitely tick that box. Dark of the Moon was always my favourite of the franchise until very, very recently. I always thought Dark of the Moon was a really awesome film for one particular reason, and that is that they changed the ending from the comic. The comic of Dark of the Moon I really like for the most part, except for the part that it ends. I think the ending of the comic is ridiculous, and I don't like it. I never have done. The whole concept of Optimus and Megatron having a truce I always found ridiculous, and I love the fact that in this movie, Optimus just kills Megatron straight off the spot. I think that was a fantastic choice, and it was so much better than the ending of the comic. And I never thought I'd say that about a movie transferring stuff to the comics, but it was actually a brilliant choice. Also, the villain, Sentinel Prime. I loved Sentinel in this movie. Leonard Nimoy did a fantastic job voicing him, and I loved how they were able just to encapsulate his character so well, in the sense that he is essentially a dick, and that is exactly what he is in this movie. Also, we get some really emotional moments in this film too, with Sam having to say goodbye to the Autobots at one particular point. We also have to see Ironhide get essentially just brutally murdered in this film, which was a complete surprise for me back in 2011. We got the introduction of things like Stealth Force. We also got the Wreckers coming into this movie. We also had Mirage coming into this movie, who's called Dino. And then we also had, there was another character as well. Wheeljack comes into this movie, otherwise known as Q. There was just some really awesome characters. Like, this movie has them all. Like, the entire Autobot cast is brilliant in this film. And even, like, every single Decepticon pretty much comes out to play for the final Battle of Chicago. Speaking of, the Battle of Chicago was, in my opinion, the best ending set piece they've done in any of the Michael Bay films. It was just really well handled. It's this massive city. The battle's going on throughout the entire city. Sector 7 is pretty much disbanded by this point, but you still feel their presence. On top of that, you have Nest coming in, who are continuing to be badasses. Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibson have all... they've always been great in this franchise from start to finish. And on top of that, you have other characters as well. The Autobots, the Decepticons, the entire cast, and even Sam. Although I was not a fan of the fact that he was the one who took down Starscream, it was still pretty cool to have Sam so heavily involved in this action. We also had Rosie Huntington-Whiteley in this film, replacing Megan Fox, who I actually think is better than Megan Fox. I actually think she did a better job than what Megan Fox was able to do in the first two movies. Given the fact that Rosie Huntington-Whiteley is not an actress, that's actually quite impressive. I mean, granted, it's no Oscar-worthy performance, but given what Megan Fox did, it comes across that way. And I think she just came across as incredibly sweet and genuine in comparison to Megan Fox, who always came across as a bit more of a bitch in this franchise. So on top of that, I think all these elements came together really, really well. The action is very, very eye-pleasing, and I just enjoyed all the elements in this film. And I think that overall, in terms of the Michael Bay movies, for me personally, this is definitely my favourite of the bunch.
You got people out there who need you. This is why you're here, Bee.
Number one, not even a contest, Bumblebee, and it's so obvious because Bumblebee is actually genuinely a good movie. Although I love every single Transformers film, they're all guilty pleasures for me, but Bumblebee is actually one I can look at as a film critic and go, yes, that is genuinely a good movie. And I had an absolute blast with Bumblebee. I've only seen it twice, and I really want to see it again, but it looks like I've kind of missed out on that. I'm going to have to wait for the Blu-ray now. But either way, I just adore everything about this movie. And when I say adore, I mean it. Like, I really mean I adore this film everything about it. This movie, as a Transformers fan, really hit home for me. It really honestly hit me on an emotional level, and I was actually crying multiple times throughout this film. The opening 5 minutes on Cybertron, I was instantly crying. Like, I couldn't believe that I was seeing this accurate representation of Cybertron on the big screen. It was so well done. It was like the War for Cybertron games. It looked just like that, and I was seeing all the G1 designs for all the classic characters like Ratchet and Ironhide, B, Prime. It was really awesome to see those G1 designs on Cybertron. I was so happy about that. And then on top of that, Haley Steinfeld was actually a really awesome character and a great performance. I loved Haley in this movie. I mean, I'm a big fan of Haley Steinfeld regardless, but she was absolutely outstanding in this movie. John Cena was a really nice, funny presence in this. Some people have said he's over the top, which I have to agree with, but I think he's very self-aware in what he's doing in this role. The action was very small scale, which was appropriate for this film. This isn't a big overblown Transformers movie. This is a personal story about Charlie and Bumblebee. So the action sequences fit that very well. The ending fight is a very small scale thing. It doesn't take place in one big city. It takes place in one small shipyard. On top of that, we have the villains in this movie, Shatter and Dropkick, played by Angela Bassett and Justin Theroux. They were really good villains. They were actually pretty well established. They were able to prove themselves as formidable foes, and we even got to see how dangerous they were when they murdered Cliffjumper. And we got Cliffjumper in this movie. So that was, again, a really nice moment. And I really liked their interactions as well. Not only as characters, in the fact that Angela Bassett was actually a lot more restrained and Justin Theroux wanted to be a bit more heavy-hitting, and she was able to hold him back a little bit. I liked their dynamic. Even the family stuff in this movie, which I thought was going to be a bit annoying, actually wasn't. It was actually quite heartfelt, and given the payoff it gets at the end, it actually works really well. The relationship in this movie, again, it's actually pretty good because you don't see... It's not like they're shoving this relationship down your throat. The relationship, in theory, doesn't actually happen in this movie, which again, I thought was nice. There's not a single shot of the slightly revealing of Haley Steinfeld in this movie at all, which again, you would never get that in a Michael Bay movie. So to actually have all these elements, this was a perfect Transformers film. This was a love letter to Transformers fans, and overall, I adore this movie to no end. So there you have it. There's my ranking for all 6 live-action Transformers movies. Make sure you let me know your ranking in the comments down below. And I know some of you are going to be a bit upset by this ranking. I know a lot of people are going to say, how can you even like these movies? But these are my guilty pleasures. I recognise that they're not good. I recognise that these movies are pretty much hot trash. But I really enjoyed them. These were the movies I grew up with. And, you know, for the most part, they are pretty terrible, other than Bumblebee, which, as I mentioned, is actually a good movie. But especially for the Michael Bay ones, yes, they are terrible, but I absolutely adore these movies and I'll watch them anytime. And I wanted to rank them. I just wanted to make a video like this. I wanted to have some fun with this video. So make sure if you tell me your list, I'll respect yours, you can respect mine, and it'll be fun. We can have a cool discussion about it in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, if you want to see more movie reviews and movie-like videos like this, be sure to subscribe, and I hope to see you guys again in my next video.